Hello, this is Jason Stealth. Welcome to the inside of my studio, located here in a corner of my dining room here in Rochester, New Hampshire. The brain of the studio is a MacBook Pro. I control Ableton with a Push 2 controller, and I have a Native Instruments Complete Control 61. The first instrument that I picked up was the guitar, so I definitely keep at least a couple of those around, my electric and acoustic guitars here. I also learned to play the bass and played that in a couple bands, so we keep one of those around too, just because I like to mix live instruments into what I do with the electronic side of things as well. My Ableton Push 2 is my primary interface and primary control device for the entire studio. It integrates tightly with Ableton software, giving me all the controls that I need at a touch of a button. It leaves me barely ever using my keyboard and trackball. Whether I'm coming up with ideas in session mode or I'm fleshing out those ideas in arrangement mode into full compositions, the Push just makes everything easier and it keeps me in the game more. The screen that it has on it has some of the most detailed feedback that I've ever really seen in any piece of gear, and it makes any of the plugins that Ableton has and a lot of different third-party ones that automatically map to it feel like using hardware. For the things that don't automatically map to the Push, all of my Native Instrument stuff, I have a Complete Control 61 key keyboard, the FATAR keybed, has two OLED screens that basically allow me to quickly access anything that I have from my Native Instruments products, sometimes even searching across various products, being able to pull up really whatever I need, basses, pads, any of that. It allows me to just kind of have anything that I would want at my fingertips, which is, it keeps me in the game more, and it keeps my hands off the keyboard and mouse, and it keeps me going so I don't have to stop that flow state. My iPad has a dual use, sometimes running an app called Touchable that controls Ableton and sometimes being a preview screen for scoring films. When the situation calls for a DJ set, I have a Native Instruments Tractor Controller S2 that runs the Tractor software right here on the MacBook Pro, which I will link to Ableton with Ableton Link. I know 4 displays can seem a little extreme, but in the world of film scoring, sometimes the track counts can get very high, and I guarantee you that none of this real estate ever really goes wasted in practice. I used to be a hardware purist like a lot of the clown army, but at this point in my career, I'm using a lot more software. I think really the only things that are hardware are my guitars and basses. Some of my favorite software synthesizers that I use that aren't Native Instruments, one of is Anna 2 from Sonic Academy. That is a very kind of a raw, very gritty, very girthy sound. Has a built-in arpeggiator that is very easy to use. There is a lot of wavetable options that give you a wide variety of sounds that you can dial in with it, and it really has probably one of the tightest sounds of any of the software synths that I use. The value of the free software Spitfire Labs can't be understated. You'll hear it a lot in my scoring work as well as a lot in my electronic work. With a wide variety, and I mean wide variety, of free sounds at your disposal, anyone can go download this. They sound absolutely great. All of these sounds are packaged in a simple-to-use interface that manages to map everything to just a small set of controls that give you a lot of expressiveness right there, easy to use. Hybrid 3 is a synth that I tend to stack with other synths that has a lot of built-in arpeggiation, and it has a couple of different synthesizers to it. It actually reminds me a lot of the analog synthesizer that was built into the old Electribes, just a little bit more complicated and layered. Another synth that routinely finds its way into my compositions is iZotope's Iris 2. It has a visual editing technique that kind of breaks the monotony from twisting knobs. Back in the Native Instruments camp, we have Massive, which is one of the first software synthesizers that I learned inside and out, managing to figure out where all the routing was, how to get into the internals and really dial in something that I was looking for. One of the things that's excellent about this is Massive uses the same framework as its big brother, Massive X or Massive 10. While both of these synths are resource intensive, the quality of their sound really can't be understated. And a lot of the times when you see somebody in the chat when I'm doing a live stream for CLOWNFEST saying that's so lush, that sound is probably coming out of Massive or Massive 10. And while it is the next evolution of Native Instruments Massive Synthesizer, some of the options in there are definitely a lot more detailed than the old Massive. So learning both is ideal. The four horsemen of scoring for me are these next four, one of which is Straylight, a contact instrument that combines granular sampling with standard sampling and layers those two. It has a lot of under-the-hood customizability, and you can load in your own samples for the grain or the sample layer. It has a sister instrument, as seen here, called Firelight, which is the same concept, but the samples are all based around the human voice. It allows you to create everything from absolute beauty to completely unsettling sounds. It's easily one of the most effective tools at generating emotion, either dark or light. This is Thrill. This is what's called a cinematic tension generator by the company that made it. Essentially what this does is it creates scary. And I use this all the time with my horror scoring. In fact, there's been scenes that I've scored with just multiple instances of this instrument. Again, you see it's highly customizable under the hood, allowing you to create your own thrills. And as with Straylight, it has a sister instrument called Mysteria, again, based around the human voice, allowing you to create angels, demons, anything in between, and really create any sort of cinematic texture that you're looking to create. And again, we have some under-the-hood options that allow for routing and different layering to create really any sort of texture that you're looking for. Once you understand the concept of how those instruments work, you can dive into the other contact instruments like this, which uses modular sampling. And while these don't have the granular aspect of Straylight and Firelight, they do allow you to put two different layers down from a series of different samples. And these are really some of my go-tos here is what with Contact. Cloud Supply is a very similar instrument to that, and this one's made for more trap and hip-hop sounds that I use for kind of trip-hop projects, things like that. And again, film scoring. Under the hood, they have a lot of routing, FX, even internal sequencers. They can map things to macros that will then in turn map immediately to my Complete Control 61. There's an analog synth version that has a lot of classic analog synth sounds, again, to be layered and combined in a myriad of different ways, and then have those routed out to different effects, macros. Then there's Ethereal Earth, which actually you'll hear in my CLOWNFEST set, very heavily used for the pads. Hybrid Keys uses pianos, organs, and all sorts of other crazy samples in between. And again, all of these are built on the same Contact framework. So once you know the inner workings and routing and macros of one of these, all you have to do is apply that knowledge to all of the different instruments in the line. Lo-Fi Glow here is, again, it's, as the name implies, a lo-fi instrument that's really good for all sorts of lo-fi beats, trap, hip-hop. When I get into my orchestral scoring, Native Instruments has me covered with all of the brass, woodwinds, and strings that I could ever need with the ensembles and the symphony essentials. Session Strings Pro finds its way into my competitions a lot because it allows you to switch between two different articulations based on velocity. It allows you to customize the string sections in any ways that you want. There are all sorts of different presets and voices for how you want that string section to be recorded or sound. And then it has what's known as smart chords, which is excellent if you're kind of bumping your head up against writer's block. You can simply set the key that you're in, and you have all of your diatonic chords set there in essentially your C major. Anyone looking to get in the orchestral side of music will find BBC Symphony Orchestra invaluable, as it shows you the layout of an actual orchestra pit, where your strings are, where your brasses are, where your woodwinds are, and what register each of these instruments falls under. So it helps you better plan orchestral compositions, and it helps you know, or better to know, what you're going to be creating actual scores for should you have a live orchestra ever recording what you compose. BBC Symphony Orchestra is generally either $45 or free if you do a little survey for Spitfire Audio. I would have liked to have had more time for effects, but let me get into some of my favorite stuff with FabFilter Pro Q3. This is actually can make finding those annoying resonating frequencies gamified by analyzing, like you just saw there, and just kind of grabbing the offending frequency, pulling, and then tightening it up. FabFilter's Pro R is my go-to reverb. It sounds very natural, and it has a built-in EQ, so you don't have to put another EQ in the chain, and allowing you to do filtering like the Abbey Road reverb trick and such. And FabFilter's Pro C2 is the god of all compressors, including even a pumping setting for extreme sidechain effects. Thank you everyone for watching, and I hope you all enjoy my set coming up in a few days.